Imagine creating one of the most critically acclaimed and successful video games of that generation, known for its fun gameplay, compelling story, and impressive atmosphere still new to the gaming scene. Tell me, how on earth could you possibly follow that up? That was Hideo Kojima's position after the success of 1998's Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1. And while most developers would simply play it safe and create a sequel with enough changes to make it stand out but still remain familiar to fans of the original, there were two key factors that led Metal Gear Solid's sequel to the game it would become. One, jumping from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. Obviously, with a huge hardware jump like that, it would be silly not to experiment with new features and environments. And two, this is Hideo Kojima we're talking about, whom of which is not one to simply play it safe. Of anything, he likes to try and do the opposite in some cases. The idea of a Metal Gear Solid 2 was a big deal. It was the most anticipated game of the time before it came out. Zone of the Enders, another Konami game that Hideo Kojima produced, came with a demo for Metal Gear Solid 2 before its release date. Rumor has it that Zone of the Enders sold as well as it did just because people wanted to play that Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. That's how anticipated it was. So once Metal Gear Solid 2 was released on November 13th, 2001 for the PlayStation 2, the game sold 1.8 million units within that month and got universal praise amongst review sites and magazines. Funnily enough though, if you ask fans of the series about Metal Gear Solid 2 now, you might not get the same opinion about this game when asking different people. And that's because Metal Gear Solid 2 isn't just the dream sequel fans were hoping for. It was, well, not what people were expecting, that's for sure. Metal Gear Solid 2 takes a weird avant-garde shift in storytelling as we see the effects of the Les Enfants Terribles project take hold of the militaristic underbelly of the world as an army of Snake clones are all having a civil war with each other, all because of an evil Snake known as Tuxedo Snake taking the President of the United States hostage. Oh wait, that's a director's cut. Metal Gear Solid 2 starts with Snake making his grand return with an infiltration on a marine tanker, all to find and take photos of a new Metal Gear they're creating. But then Snake dies.
Snake, respond! Snake! Snake!
No, it's not a joke this time. And the rest of the game takes place 2 years later on a decontamination facility called the Big Shell as a new character named Raiden.
Did you say nerd?
Raiden's mission is to rescue the President of the United States from a group of terrorists who call themselves the Sons of Liberty, who threaten the President's life and to blow up the facility, causing a massive environmental nightmare. Of course, this is a Metal Gear game, so it really is never that simple. And let me tell you, even for a Metal Gear game, this game has twist upon twist upon twist upon twist. So many layers and people double-crossing each other. Even for Metal Gear, it gets pretty crazy, especially during the last segment of the game. Alright, so talking about this game's plot is really difficult without spoiling stuff, so I'm going to talk about a couple of light spoilers just so I can talk a little bit more about the game's theming, because honestly, that's one of my favorite parts about this game. So the game focuses a lot on betrayals and being lied to, as well as the digitization of the 21st century, and how that impacts things from normal people's lives to how the military works. This is done by, again, having so many twists that the player starts having a hard time telling what's real and what's not in the game's universe. And this extends past the plot itself into the game as a whole. I mean, think about this. Raiden is nowhere on the box art of the original game, and any other box arts that came after the first version will have Raiden there, but only as a side piece. Snake still takes the center of the stage here. In the intro cinematic, Raiden looks more like a side character where it focuses mostly on Snake. Press releases would show gameplay that features Snake as playable, even though these are segments where you play as Raiden in the actual game. Now, it's pretty common knowledge that Raiden is the main character of Metal Gear Solid 2, but even knowing that, the character switch fits within this theming of being lied to. The game starts off like the sequel everybody would expect, only to pull it away and give you what might as well be an alternate reality version of what a Metal Gear Solid sequel could be. And imagine playing this when it came out. There's no doubt in my mind that your average fan would feel betrayed by this switch of character, much like Raiden does throughout the game upon learning more truths about his mission.
Maybe.
The digitization aspect of the game's theming comes in a few different ways. Where Snake is an experienced soldier having 3 full climactic missions under his belt, Raiden has only been trained via VR missions, which is implied to be the Metal Gear Solid VR missions game that was released after the original Metal Gear Solid. And the Big Shell mission is Raiden's first actual field experience, even though he already went through a simulation of the mission prior to the start of the game. He's less confident when approached by something he had not seen in the simulation or his prior VR training. He's easily outmatched by everybody else that clearly has a lot more real-life training than he does. And not to mention how easily manipulable Raiden is. And not just by shadowy figures in the background of the game's plot, but the villains and even Pliskin use Raiden to some degree during the game. Outside of Raiden specific, the game touches upon artificial intelligence, breeding a generation of soldiers through VR training, and the spread of information and what is considered the truth. One thing people generally talk about with this game's plot is how it kind of predicted the way that social media works to a scarily accurate degree. I won't go too deep into it since that's during one of the last monologues in the game, but yeah, talking about the flood of trivial information and how one should be shown the truth that that suits them rather than the actual truth, and going on to speak on people's own confirmation biases and how people will only want to see the truth that they want to see. There are plenty of videos made by people smarter than I that explain this better, but pretty much in this 2001 video game, Kojima predicted fake news, internet flame wars, and user analytics being used to filter out information. All of this within a game that makes it a point to lie to the player and subvert the expectations as to what is and isn't true. Of course, that's not to say the tone of the game relies on these themes, it's still a Metal Gear experience through and through. You get long conversations and lectures about various topics from character backstories to, well, all the shit I just talked about. And right afterwards, you get some sort of wacky boss that has some sort of unrealistic gimmick to them, like being a vampire or being really lucky or being really fat. And just like its predecessor, these characters are played completely straight with no winks or rolling eyes.
Bombs tell the time with every moment of their existence, and nothing else announces its own end with such a fanfare. Glad you could make it. The party's about to start.
No, once Dead Cell member Taxi Driver Man comes out and starts preaching about how brilliant Taxi Driver is, you gotta take it seriously when the Colonel calls and says, "Ryan, tell him you think King of Comedy was a more compelling film. That should lower his guard." Metal Gear Solid 2's postmodernist story and characters, even as wacky as those are able to still captivate the player in a serious tactical future warfare type setting, and I think this is also partly due to the strong art style this game has. Yoji Shinkawa once again returns as the art director, and really the art direction with Metal Gear Solid 2 improves on every aspect of the original Metal Gear Solid's art direction, which mainly comes from the change in hardware. While I do enjoy Metal Gear Solid's winter environments, grimy military interiors, and cool color scheme, I feel like Metal Gear Solid 2's art direction does a great job of standing on its own from its prequel, which is ironic since the Snake segment of the game mimics the first game's art direction. Raiden's segment in the Big Shell has more greens and oranges for the overall design. Most of the interiors are more sleek, and you get warmer color schemes due to the segment being during the day to sunset. Pretty unique art direction for this series, and I think the only game that has anything remotely like this would be Metal Gear Solid 5 if you keep the base color as orange. The bright exterior and dark interiors make navigation through this game fun and challenging due not only to the gameplay being near perfect, but the enemy AI being the most advanced AI anyone had experienced at the time of this game's release. Every guard has a set path that they follow just as they did before, but there are some added complications to what guards can do during these set patterns. For one, knocked out and dead guards no longer disappear, so if an alive guard sees the body, they will be alerted, causing more guards to show up and investigate the area. So bodies now need to be taken care of in order to avoid this. Not only that, but guards now report in to their superiors periodically.
Reporting no problems in the hall on B1 in the Shell 1 core.
So if a guard is killed or knocked out, they won't make that report, causing their superior to become suspicious,
Why are you late with your status report?
sending reinforcements to investigate.
Communications with Strut F have ceased. Carry out an investigation immediately.
So you can't just take out guards willy-nilly anymore, you kinda have to plan out things before execution, especially on the harder difficulties. What makes that more interesting is that the combat in the game is vastly improved from the previous game. Since we are now used to 3D environments, we have probably one of the greatest additions to any stealth game: first-person aiming. Honestly, in a way, this makes the game too easy during the standard sneaking segments, especially when you get the M9 tranquilizer gun for the obligatory no-kill run. Though it also makes boss fights much more fast-paced and in turn more intense, especially the one before the final fight. It's really easy to take out guards, but again, with all the other factors that go into each enemy's AI, you still gotta be fast-paced and precise with each decision. And another added feature is the ability to hold up guards by sneaking up and pulling your weapon on them. Of course, there's an abundance of tools at your disposal during the mission, from boxes to shit you use just once for the plot. Actually, a lot of the tools are only used once for the plot.
You're Ames, aren't you?
But given that the game isn't that long, it never really bugged me. Though it would have been cool if things like the directional mic had to be used to listen in on guards, or have a few more areas where the disguise could have been used. The gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 2 is incredibly solid, and it has a fantastic story, compelling characters, and a unique presentation. And what really brings it together for me is the phenomenal soundtrack. Harry Gregson Williams was Hideo Kojima's choice of composer for this game, but he was responsible for all the orchestrated music in the game. A little less known is Norihiko Hibino, who worked on all the in-game music. Both composers do a fantastic job, and every track in this game is just so catchy and fits each sequence perfectly. Wait a minute, what the fuck is this? Metal Gear Solid 2 came out at probably not the best time, November 2001, since literally a month ago was one of America's greatest tragedies. Obviously, nobody could have predicted this, but as a result, there were some minor edits given Metal Gear Solid 2's focus on warfare in the US. Like, all American flags were removed and any mention of nuking Manhattan was replaced with trying to cut off all the electricity. The biggest removal was apparently at one point the Statue of Liberty was supposed to get knocked over and crash into Manhattan. I'm sure I don't have to tell you why this was removed. So did Metal Gear Solid 2 live up to its predecessor? In my opinion, yes, and that's simply because it was able to completely subvert everyone's expectations and give an incredibly out-there theming and plotline while also improving on everything fantastic about the first game. And while most every other Metal Gear sequel played it pretty safe after, Metal Gear Solid 2 remains one of the most unique sequels to a successful video game franchise ever. So Metal Gear Solid 2 reviewed very well and was a huge commercial success due to how anticipated it was. Fan reaction was more mixed, and as time went on, Metal Gear Solid 2 was seen more as a black sheep of the franchise due to how safe the subsequent sequels kept its content. Nobody said 2 was bad like Snake's Revenge or anything, but the fact that Raiden, a character not as cool as Snake, takes the spotlight and the wacky, deceitful nature of the story made 2 not as appealing to replay for most fans as much as 1 was, or 3 would be after its release. I think as time goes on though, fans have come to appreciate Metal Gear Solid 2 more since its themes would be the basis of how Metal Gear Solid 4's world building would be established, as well as having Raiden making a more dignified, triumphant return to the series as a cyborg ninja. The Metal Gear Solid HD collection that was released on PS3 and Xbox 360 back in 2011 included an HD version of Metal Gear Solid 2. Since the Xbox 360 version is compatible with the Xbox One and Series X, it's available on those storefronts. The HD collection has recently been taken down due to some copyright issues over the historical footage it used, but it's being listed as a temporary removal. And honestly, there's no reason why you shouldn't get this collection. Metal Gear Solid 2 is worth the price of admission alone. But it also has Metal Gear Solid 3 and Peace Walker HD, making this literally the greatest HD collection right up there with the Devil May Cry one. And this HD collection is also proof that Metal Gear Solid 2 doesn't need any sort of remake. All I'd ask for is this collection to become available on all platforms. These are some of the greatest games of all time, so there's no reason not to re-release this collection. It would make them millions. I think we can all agree though that Metal Gear Solid 2 is a really important game, because while it's not the best Metal Gear game, it did pave way for what is generally considered to be the greatest video game sequel of all time.